This is the solution to problem 61 from homework 7.2. And we're asked to explain why the equation sine theta equals the square root of 1 minus cosine squared theta is not an identity. And then once we explain that, we're supposed to find a counterexample to disprove that this is an identity. So although we know from the Pythagorean identity that sine squared theta plus cosine squared theta equals 1, we now can isolate sine squared theta here. So we can have sine squared theta equals 1 minus cosine squared theta, subtracting cosine squared theta from both sides. And then if we take the square root of both sides, the left side becomes sine theta, and the right side becomes plus or minus the square root of 1 minus cosine squared theta. So the reason that the given expression up here is not an identity is we're missing the opposite of the square root of 1 minus cosine squared theta. So we're missing the negative values. A counterexample that we can try would be any angle in quadrant 3 or quadrant 4 when sine theta is less than 0, right? Because if we just have the positive square root here, we can never have a negative value for sine theta, which is why it's not an identity. So I chose theta equals 7 pi over 6 for my counter example. So 7 pi over 6, I'm going to draw on that angle. This is 7 pi over 6. The coordinate on the unit circle is negative rad 3 over 2, negative 1/2. And now let's go ahead and evaluate this to show that it's not an identity. So I would have sine of 7 pi over 6 is equal to the square root of 1 minus cosine of 7 pi over 6, or cosine squared of 7 pi over 6. So sine of pi over 6 is negative 1/2. I want to see if that's equal to 1 minus cosine 7 pi over 6 is negative rad 3 over 2. So negative rad 3 over 2 squared. So now let's simplify. So we're going to have negative 1/2. We're going to see if that's equal to the square root of 1 minus negative rad 3 over 2 squared is equal to 3. Rad 3 squared is 3. 2 squared is 4. So that would be 3/4. So it's negative 1/2 equal to the square root of 1/4. The square root of 1/4 is the square root of 1 over the square root of 4, which is 1/2. So negative 1/2 is not equal to 1/2. So this is a counterexample which disproves the identity.